Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I am your host, John Reid. We'd like to thank the LCPM network for bringing us into your living rooms each and every week. This week, we're going to talk about redistricting. We're going to give you all the things you need to know to prepare you as early voting is underway. Also, we're going to be discussing about the leaked draft that came out last week regarding the Supreme Court's decision to potentially overturn Roe versus Wade and its impact on the Black and Brown communities and what's being done about it. And finally, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. You need to find out some details on a particular issue that's not often talked about in our communities. Stay tuned. May 6th was the beginning of early voting, and around the state of Virginia, there are many races that are taking place, but many people are still a little confused. They are wondering where they go to vote and what districts or where they can vote in. And so what we wanted to do tonight was do a little something I like to call classes in session. I was not used to be a school teacher, so we want to give a little presentation for you and kind of prepare you for what's going to take place and where you can go vote and who are the particulars in each race. Redistricting 2022, and this was brought to us by Who's News to our colleague Jenna Edwards. Redistricting is the process of redrawing the boundaries of districts that elect representatives who serve specific geographic areas. Redistricting occurs every 10 years following the United States decennial census and is the responsibility of state and local governments. It is governed by federal and state constitutional and statutory laws. This is important. Why? Because if you don't get out and fill that census, these are the results of districts, especially if you live in Black and Brown communities. You very well know how they can redistrict certain areas of the state geographically to make sure that Black neighborhoods, you could be living across the street and it could be divided. So we put another example of that. If you live in Prince William County, you know exactly what that's like, as the 7th and 10th congressional district split right down the middle in a very heavily populated Black area. So make sure you know specifically where you go and prepare yourself. And when that census comes out, Black people, we have to fill it out. We talked about this a few weeks ago. We talked about the importance of filling out the census because it also determines what schools receive the money. So prepare yourself when it's time, not when 2030 comes around. Prepare yourself in 2025 to be ready for this to come. In Stafford County, where do you go to vote? Again, starting on May 6th, what happened last week at the Government Center, 1300 Courthouse Road in Stafford. There's also a 24/7 drop box where you can be able to make sure to put your vote in. So you'll have plenty of opportunities to let your voices be heard. Now, this is for the 7th Congressional District. And if you see here, the Democratic incumbent is Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, and she does not have a primary opponent. That's important to remember. So we're right in the primary races right now. This is the major race that's going on as of this time, or the primary. Now, for the Republican candidates, it is a virtual who's who of who's going into the race. If you live in the PD16 area, you may know some of these people. So there are 10 candidates are vying for that seat, and it'll be very interesting to see who comes out of it with the primary. Now, as of this time, Yesley Vega, for those who know, especially in the Prince William County, she's the Coles District Supervisor, is expected to win this based on some projections, but as history has told us, expect the unexpected when it comes to these races. So there are 10 candidates who are all vying for the opportunity to face the incumbent, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. Now, what we did here was give you a little picture of what it's like and give you a little holistic view of the websites, because if you kind of notice something, you might be frustrated. You may have to try to do Google searches or go through the county website, but just some of the issues that people have had and some of the complaints that have been brought up when trying to do simple research and why this is so important. And what we did was kind of give you a view of each county here. And while there's not a lot of information in some of them, especially places like Spotsylvania and King George, not very transparent when it comes to the counties. Fredericksburg has a very interactive map that allows you to enter information, but at the same time, they have a very good local redistricting guide available as well. And so we'll be putting the website specifically on our PD16 Perspective Facebook page. So you'll be able to view those websites and be able to get that information. And also Stafford, very detailed, but could definitely be more user-friendly, kind of did the work so you didn't have to, but also understanding this process, because people need to know who their elected officials are and they need to know where they can go to vote. But we know often, especially, a lot of us are busy and we don't have time to go through a lot of minutia in order to try to find where our candidates are located. So, shout out to Jenna and Who's News for putting this together for us and really give you, but the problem, especially in Stafford, is a lot of outdated resources, population maps. Some of the information is still from a decade ago. And so, encourage these government officials or interns or someone's working social media, get it up to date. Let's put something out there. And here's some key takeaways and recommendations. Redistricting impacts are not clearly or concretely laid out for the average voter, who likely does not have the time, as we said, energy, or the resources to put the pieces together. It's so much information that you can find yourself very frustrated, and you just want to go out and vote. People want to go, maybe stop off on their lunchtime or dropping off the kids and be able to go out and do their constitutional duty. But at the same time, if they can't get access to the information, where are they going to go? So this has been a problem for civic engagement because the burden becomes too great for people to educate themselves effectively and act accordingly. That's why we have shows like this, so that you don't have to. It doesn't teach you how to think, but we gives you ideas. Try to become a depository of resources, if you will. And so you know exactly who to vote for in the upcoming congressional race in the 7th district. But here's what counties can do. We're making a clarion call here. Counties, please connect the dots on the who, what, when, why, and how of redistricting. Create centralized portals where all relevant information is clear and accessible, thereby casing the burden on citizens. This way, it reduces the stress, because if we had difficulty trying to find those sites, what do you think that father or that father who has to work 40, 50 hours a week, or that mom who has to pick up the kids, go home, work, cook dinner, take care of her family, take care of her own self. And when it comes to finding this information, if she's looking at a website from 2010, 2011 information, she's going to throw her hands up. This is especially true in Black and brown communities, because there's always going to be the stigma that our vote doesn't matter. But let me tell you, if you've been following this show since we first been on the air, your vote matters. Every vote matters. Every person matters. But counties, help us out here. PD16 interns, get on your social media, put your information, make sure it's up to date on the regular, especially now that early voting is underway. What we want to do, speaking of resources, we want to give you some. So here are some websites where you can go to and watch this show. You can take a few moments to pause it, copy and paste this, and write it into your browser, and that will keep you up to date. They have not only that, but they also have information on educational fund voting for NAACP and for the Christian Gerrymandering Project. Now, this third one is very important because we know more than anything else in a lot of states throughout the country, gerrymandering still happens, whether they like to admit it or not. And that purpose is to make sure that Black and brown communities are divided so that it reduces their power and gives power to certain local officials or to certain parties and gives them the ability to win elections. So here's a Virginia local redistricting guide as well. It gives you information on the decisions that were laid down in December, and especially if you live in Fredericksburg, Regional Chamber of Commerce elected officials, so you can have more information on those that are running in their elected offices. So let's shout out to Who's News for making that all possible. And that is your redistricting. We're going to talk more about redistricting and the races that are to come as the primary draws closer. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that what took place last week on a Monday night, when most people are probably watching the playoffs or probably watching the next episode of Bridgerton, was that there was a leak. There was a leak, and it has not stopped leaking. The Supreme Court has drafted a decision that could potentially overturn a 50-year-old decision on Roe versus Wade and about reproductive rights. Now, want to say this in general because a lot of people may have different views. The view that your uncle or aunt may have on one end may not be the same as your niece or daughter or cousin. And while we're not here to discuss views from one particular side of the fence, what we do want to do is give you about the idea about the ramifications of this leaked draft decision by the Supreme Court. And if it is handed down, what it could do, especially if you have loved ones or people you know in states. And one thing you have to understand, when laws this magnitude are overturned, it has several ramifications down the line. You always got to think about things with not just what's happening in the immediate, but what could happen in the future. And so I want to read off some statistics this was from the Associated Press and from a PBS report that we have obtained, and just talk a little bit about some things that can happen, especially in Black and brown communities. Because as we all know, when the laws of this nature change, we know the first community that's going to be affected is usually Black and brown communities. So I want to just read this statistic out for you. And the Associated Press shows that Black and Hispanic women, they have some of the lowest insurance rates in the nation, right? And for example, Texas, Mississippi, my home state of Georgia, at least 16% of Black women and 36% of Latinas were uninsured just a couple of years ago. Some of the highest rates in the country. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what does that got to do with the state of Virginia? Well, see, here's the thing. One of the potential ramifications, and we're already seeing in states like Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, and even Indiana, where they are restricting abortion rights after even so much as 6 weeks as they are in Oklahoma. And what that could do is create its own version of North and South, where there are red states and there are blue states, where you could see a mass exodus of people out of a state like a Missouri or a Texas or Kansas, someplace, and go to a place that's a little more liberal about this process, like in Nevada, California, and what have you. So the thing we have to be mindful of is not only just the restrictions, but we know in most cases in Black and Latino women, they may not have the finances in order to travel to these states. And so with tighter restrictions, it can become a financial burden, it become a mental burden as well. Again, not to say that or on one side of the fence or the other, but the fact is it will have financial and mental ramifications. So to these states that are going to put tighter restrictions, are they going to have facilities in place to make sure that those mothers are taken care of? Are they? Then brings up to another point that hasn't been discussed often as well, even though it has been passed. And you go back into December and we talk about the Maternal Health Care Act. That was passed, the Mama Bus Act. Some of you may know it as. And what that does is to be able to put or provide facilities for hospitals, to give federal funding to some of these hospitals, including states like Virginia. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, for people who are expectant mothers. So what are those states doing to make sure now that the women are taken care of? Now, you saw a lot of tweets from a lot of leaders on both sides of the aisle, in the local state. And the former minority leader, Eileen Fiddler-Corn, came out and said that, hey, on a tweet, that there needs to make sure that if you're a Democrat, you want to see more of the leadership. The Democrats hold on to the seat so that it can become, abortion rights, reproductive rights become the law of the land. But on the other end, Governor Glenn Youngkin, who adamantly agrees that it should be a state's issue and not a federal issue. Again, however far side of the fence you lay upon that is your decision. That's a private decision. That being said, just that these are the things that can happen if this decision is overturned. But going back to the Maternal Health Care Act, because one of the things that's really not discussed that much is what's being done to ensure that there are healthy births, so that women are given the resources necessary to be provided for. And so I want to read some of the things that Vice President Kamala Harris had proposed in the Maternal Health Care Day of Action back in December. And I want to read some of the things that they are proposing. They call to action that 11 states and Washington, D.C. asked to extend Medicaid and coverage for a full year after pregnancy under the American Rescue Plan. And this plan is working to make Medicaid and CHIP coverage for 12 months after pregnancy a reality for people across the country. And this is to expand coverage for postpartum coverage during this call to action. And of course, there's been a lot of cases of postpartum depression with mothers as well. So are these states willing to do that to make sure these mothers are protected? And also, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, has approved Louisiana, Virginia, New Jersey, and Illinois essential Medicaid and CHIP coverage for 12 months on or before April 1st, 2022. So they're also continuing to work with other states, including the District of Columbia. And they're working to make sure that 12 months after pregnancy, that they're getting CHIP coverage and Medicaid, and CMS is trying to work with those states in order to receive those funds that ensure consistency with federal standards, including those set by the American Rescue Plan. States have to go through a formal process run by CMS because Medicaid, it covers more than 40% of births in the United States. And we know that's where a lot of Black and brown mothers are under Medicaid coverage. So if it helps with Medicaid coverage and provides them the resources they need, wonderful. It will make sure that not only the mother, but the child is taken care of as well. Because if we're going to be talking pro-life, we need to be talking about the life of the mother as well, not just of the fetus, not just of the baby itself. And based on the Health and Human Services estimates, approximately 720,000, I'm going to say that again, 720,000 people would benefit if all states were to adopt the American Rescue Plan's new option to extend postpartum Medicaid and CHIP coverage for a full 12 months. And you can just imagine what that would do for a young mother, and if she's given the opportunity to care for, that could have a lot of decisions be made where a mother and father who maybe if they are wavering on the decision to have a child could give a little more comfort in that process. And also when they are calling for what's called a birthing-friendly hospital designation. And CMS is proposing the birthing-friendly hospital designation to drive improvements in maternal health outcomes and maternal health equity. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, a little more. But with this birthing-friendly option, would assist consumers in choosing hospitals, such as maybe Stafford Hospital, that's demonstrated a commitment to maternal health. And so making sure that the mother is prepared and provided for is a big plus. So also finally engaging the healthcare industry to improve health outcomes. This upcoming summer, CMS will convene healthcare industry stakeholders, including healthcare facilities, insurance companies, state officials, and providers to focus on industry commitments to improve health outcomes experienced by pregnant and postpartum people. CMS and experts will share best practices and commitments and request that healthcare industry leaders make commitments to advance maternal health. Now, again, this is a personal decision, and whatever the family decides and what the woman decides is her decision. That being said, states that are looking to have stricter rules, what are they doing to make sure that all mothers are taken care of? Are they going to look for these federal funds to work for under the American Rescue Plan to help make sure that the mother and child are fully provided for? May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and often we talk about issues to address. On the show last week, we had talked about the Youth Athlete Mental Health Workshop, and shout out to Carl Armstrong for hosting a wonderful event, to Heather Hutchinson, and for so many other people, Pastor Gary Holland, and for the LCPM Network for bringing it to your homes. It was a very fruitful and powerful discussion that really talked about how young athletes can address their mental health and what coaches and parents can do to make sure that their mental state is taken care of. But as we address these issues, there's one group of people, and if you thought about the last segment, you can see where I'm going with this, that often we don't talk about, and the trauma that happens with Black mothers. And I want to read another statistic for you. It is nearly 10% of new mothers suffer from trauma, and this is from birthingmagic.com. Nearly 10% of new mothers suffer from trauma related to childbirth complications, according to experts. Black women, compared to the broader population, experience a higher prevalence of maternal mental health conditions, particularly postpartum depression and anxiety. Now, there have been women who have said in the past that they struggle because, number one, how they're going to afford taking care of their child. Number two, not having access to the same healthcare resources that others may have. And also, we know that racism has been declared a public health crisis. Black mothers deal with the stress of, hey, can I raise a Black child in a world that's going to treat him or her differently? And so these are traumatic issues that often are not talked about and discussed. Well, this upcoming Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., and it's going to be on Facebook, and we're going to put the link on our Facebook page as well so you can view it. And if you want to join in, it's going to be an event, and it's going to be that's going to reframe the narrative around Black maternal mental health. And it's going to be a series of workshops. And again, it's going through birthingmagic.org. I'm sorry, birthingmagic.org.com, birthingmagic.org. And you go on that website and you'll have a chance to join in and hear from not only mental health experts, but from others as well. How do Black women deal with the challenge of addressing their maternal health and to make sure that them and the babies are going to be able to live healthy? And so by doing that, by taking care of the mind, everything else will follow. And so these are things we need to address in the PD16 area. Are we providing enough mental health resources for Black and brown women so that they can be able to have successful births? And not only just successful births, but the process afterwards. Because many do suffer from postpartum depression. And for many who suffer from postpartum depression, what is being done? What resources are available to make sure that they are prepared and provided for? This upcoming week, if you live in the Warrenton area, you may have noticed that at the courthouse every week there has been a Black Lives Matter vigil. Well, on Saturday, May 14th at 10 o'clock a.m. to 10:45, there's going to be the 100th consecutive Black Lives Matter vigil. Why is that so important? It's important because justice is not a one-time thing. Many of us know you go to a protest once or twice, you turn to a social media moment, you get a few likes on the gram, and you keep it moving. But see, justice is a continuous thing. So when you look at history and you look at the seismic changes that have happened when it comes to equity, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to voting rights, it's because people were consistent in their approach. It was because people made sure that the goal, and Reverend Bishop William Barber III said this as well. He talks about this as a Poor People's Campaign. That justice is ultimate victory. That you have to have a sense of that because you are in a war when it comes to voting rights. You are in a war when it comes to educational equity, when it comes to health equity, mental health equity, protection of our young Black and brown women, and men. And so you cannot make this a one-time event. And so shout out to the people in Warrenton for making this possible, and that there's going to be an event. It's going to be taking place. It's going to be the 100 consecutive Black Lives Matter vigil. If you're in the area, Warrenton Courthouse, make sure you come out, be supportive, and let your voice be heard, even just for a few moments. It's imperative that we stand for justice, stand for those lives, speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves, and be able to make a difference in your community. Again, thank you all so much for joining us for this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I'm your host, John Reid. Shout out always to LCPM Network. If you see this, you're going to see us on our Facebook page. Like, share, make sure, let people know about it. And make sure to get notifications so you know every Monday at 9 a.m. we're bringing the news to your community to make sure you have an opportunity to get out, vote, and make a difference. I'm John Reid, and I'll see you next time.